Okay, so I'll be talking about generated structured data from biographical text a tiny little bit, because it's not so different from the Wikipedia stuff, but mostly a lot about evaluation, because it's important. So just a little bit of background. The source that I'll be talking about is the biography portal from the Netherlands. And it's a collection of biographical dictionaries. So multiple sources written from in different times, sometimes nowadays, sometimes 2 centuries ago. The oldest sources are from the 17th century and the largest from the 19th and 20th. And they're all written in Dutch. So the things that you're going to see now are basically, well, there are good tools for Dutch. It's one of the languages that has more resources than most, but, well, there's only one English in terms of resources, so it's less good than that. This being Dutch, the events that we extract are a little bit more focused. So this is one of the ways that we deal with the quality being a little bit less good. We really focus on typical events from these biographical resources. So people, times and locations, and some of the relations that are very common and very relevant for historians. So to give an example, this is Anna Maria Schuurman. She was it's called a house teacher and a poet. And for instance, in the text we find that there was an education relation where she was a student in theology. And in a time where actually women were not allowed at the university, they made an exception for her where she could sit behind a curtain. And what we get if we do that from a lot of biographies is something like this. So we have like someone being born, some kind of education information, whether they got married or not, a profession, and usually when they die. So that is really the focus or the information that is most reliably extracted from these texts. So how is this used? Well, we have these original constructions, these biographical stories with all kinds of information. And what we do is we extract building blocks, all kinds of pieces of information with the idea that an historian or someone who's interested in cultural heritage can create new objects by looking for patterns across this information. So they would create maybe something like this, like a new structure, something that shows us a new insight based on information that is extracted. Now I'm coming to the point of evaluation. So let's say that we want to evaluate the house, and the system output didn't quite look like this, what it should have given us, but it looked like this. And we get something like this. So the house still kind of stands, we can kind of see the shape, but we're missing a couple of pieces. What could also happen, however, is that our system output does something like this. This actually has more things correct than the previous message if you look in terms of overlap. But since it's constructed differently, you will not get the same shape, you will not get the same outcome. So, sorry about the slides. So language technology can be used in various applications, and it gives you many possibilities, but even though ChatGPT may seem like magic, there is no magic. So language technology can handle more data, find patterns that would not be noticed by a human, and support systematic analysis. But it does not guarantee that your analyses are more reliable than a person analyzing. Analyses are not better because they are replicable. I mean, that is also something that people often say. Computers don't make mistakes and you can replicate. Or that the errors don't matter because there's so much data that this is just a little bit of noise. The only guarantee that you have is that there will be errors. So, is it more reliable? Well, computers are better at counting and systematic decisions, and they don't want a specific outcome. They're not expecting to find something and then kind of interpreting that in there. But they can contain and amplify bias. So sometimes the bias of a computer is actually worse. In language technology, it often is. And they are still worse at interpreting natural language. So we still evaluate on the interpretations by people. And replicability. So in theory, you can replicate an experiment where you take Angel's pipeline or the one for Dutch, you run it again, you extract your information and do the same thing. In practice, it won't always work. And the question is if replicability makes your research more valid if you're replicating a bias that is in your system. So if it's just extracting the same wrong things over and over again. It's also good to notice that if you work with systematic data, systematic analysis, you can also replicate what a human does, just by carrying out the same resource or having it carried out by different people. Another common error is that the big data, the amount of data, compensates for errors. So what we typically do when we evaluate our tools is that we look at accuracy, how much is correct, or F-score based on some ground truth created by people. And then the assumption is that if the score is good, it's a very accurate system, then the overall conclusion, the overall pattern will be true. But that is not necessarily the case. It depends on the kind of errors. I'm actually going to show some of the examples of things you can do with the biography now and show why evaluation matters. And then I will end up with some of the Intavia stuff. So one of the things that we did was we looked at who is mentioned most in the biographical portal. And this is just a ranking based on a very simple method for identified named entities. And I'll come back to this one later. Now, why does the count of error manage? A very clear example is if you want to disambiguate locations. A lot of locations in the Dutch biographical portal. If you have Amsterdam, there are multiple, one over there in America, one where Angel and I work. If you then disambiguate this in this resource, a very good tactic is to prefer the location in the Netherlands or near the Netherlands or closely related to the Netherlands. And you get an accuracy of 97%, which is extremely high. Hardly any language technology things get that. Now, if you have someone who's investigating where most of the official people who work in The Hague come from, these 3% don't matter because, well, most probably come from North Holland or South Holland, and that there's 3% coming from other places that are not in the Netherlands is not going to affect that result. But if you have a historian who's wondering, what is the connection between officials that are overseas and the Netherlands? How often did they travel home? Did they have relations with people from the Netherlands? This becomes a huge problem. Because the former Dutch colonies where they were living, they would typically have other locations that, at least in these ancient resources, will have Dutch names. So there, these 3% are going to directly interfere with the research question. Another quick example, sentiment detection. This comes from colleagues of mine who looked at how good different systems are at identifying sentiment. And these numbers are precision and recall. And precision is of the things that you find, how many are correct? And recall is of all the things that there were to find, how many did you find? And what is important to see is if you look at these systems, the relation of precision and recall between positive and negative is different. And what happens, and what is true for most systems, is that they tend to overclassify negative examples. So they find more of them, and they also more often classify something as negative that isn't. But the problem is that depending on your exact sample and the data, how big this difference is will differ. And again, this might matter. So just an example, let's say that what is happening, you want to measure if some people get more positive or negative, and you see that they were positive and then they get more negative. This is what would be the true outcome. Your system does something like that. It's still the same pattern, but maybe you were looking for when that happened. And if there's then a timeline and the date where it happened changes, that might matter. More importantly, it could also be that the system output would be the other way around. So you think you're measuring a pattern through time, but you're actually measuring a difference in how well the system can detect sentiment over difference from time. So you have to basically look at both how well the system is doing, count how much it gets correct, but also what I call extrinsic evaluation. How suitable is it for your use case? And basically take this hypothesis that you're looking at or what you want to know as a researcher to find out what is happening. Another thing is provenance modeling. So you want to know if you use the Intavia data, what was generated automatically and what was created by people, because the reliability of that will differ. So the challenge is how to convey this message in the current hype. And I'm actually going to go a bit faster. So what Angel did, he basically has been building as part of Intavia something that I've been wanting to use for a very long time, ways to compare outcomes of tools. So these are state-of-the-art tools. One is the human gold. These are annotations by people for Dutch. And the numbers that you see are the precision and recall. So you see there are the FLAIR Dutch entity models doing quite well, precision of 75% and a recall of 91. But it's not like for English, and it also partially is related to the data. So some of the other tools that are quite good, so Stanza precision 94 recall, it's already lower, and it's clearly lower for English. It's partly because it's Dutch and partly because this data is old. But what Angel did is he's created tools to investigate these differences. So what you see here is the amount of artworks identified by different systems. So the green, each of these colors is a different system. So only one system finds artworks. The amount of locations found by one system compared to another is different. The amount of persons, so Spacey finds a lot of people, but Flair NL finds many more locations. So you can really see the overview and pattern and the amount of data that you get out of different tools. Another thing you can do is compare. So this is a shot that shows what different tools provided as an outcome. So you can see that certain entities are identified by multiple tools, the span. So some people take, for instance, in Charlotte Sophie Bentinck, the fool, and some just take Sophie Bentinck. You see that von Hessen-Homburg is identified as a person name by one tool, but Hessen-Homburg as a location by another tool. So you can see the different outcomes of different tools. Or aggregate it and then see, okay, how many tools identified each span as a person or location. So green is identified by 3 tools, and yellow by 2, and red by 1. Is that correct, Angel? It's more or less the gist of it. So this is quite a nice way to get a very quick feeling of what the impact is of choosing one tool over another. If there is a very quick, see if this works. No, it doesn't work. So what I wanted to show is what Angel also did is created spreadsheets of overviews of what the tools give as an output. So you can see very quickly where one tool differs a lot from another, either in terms of data and say, okay, there's something with this data because one tool is finding all kinds of locations, another isn't. And also how you can compare the outcome. So this list that I showed you earlier, who are the people who are mentioned most? If you create those with different tools, the list changes. And you do see the top people more or less coming up from most tools, but in the top 100, there are also definitely people that are not found by all tools. So some tools completely miss out some people in their research. So this is important to know. And another important note is that for Dutch, you have multiple tools, but for a lot of other languages you don't, but then you still need to realize that all these errors that you see clearly, because of course these tools cannot all be correct if you're comparing multiple tools, they basically also happen if you only have one tool that you're using or looking at. And now, since I'm not in my slides anymore, I cannot click to the next slide. So this is, yeah, there it is. So, to conclude, even if we have these amazing tools now, evaluation still matters, and I kind of went quickly, but actually the results by ChatGPT on biographical data are not great. You need to think of extrinsic evaluation, so what do you want to use it for and what matters for that? And what Intavia has been contributing is these views that I think are very important to raise awareness, to make people see, hey, it matters which tool you use, dive into it. And also overviews that can help spot potential problems in your either because of the tool you use or with the data. And if you have any questions, you probably, maybe Angel can also answer some of them, because these nice views have been built by him. Thank you.